One of my chess aims this year is to actually start studying more opening theory and actually start remembering it. So I've had an idea about how to study my opening theory in a more, structured way than just randomly drilling some positions or looking at particular openings and then forgetting about them. And I've had this idea of doing it by levels, and it's based on the Silman approach to the end game, where I don't know if you've got that book where he might say, you're 1200, study this, this, and this, come back when you're 1300. And it's a similar thing to that. What I'm talking about here is not just about studying one particular opening, like, oh, I'm going to go and learn the French or I'm going to go and learn the Dutch. I'm talking about, really sitting down with myself and looking at all the different openings that I'm going to face, creating a full repertoire for both white and black. And each particular opening and variation is going to be itemized according to 3 distinct levels. So level 1 is going to be a basic overview where it should be enough just to get a game, to get the basic ideas and the plans and the position, and it should be enough to start playing that particular variation. But the theory shouldn't be very deep, it shouldn't be very difficult, it should just be a basic overview, and I should aim to drill those positions in Chessable. That's what I'm going to use, but you could use something else, so that I know those positions overall for all the single opening repertoire for both white and black, and I've got enough to get a game and start learning from my mistakes. And then once I've achieved that throughout, my full repertoire, both white and black, it's then ready to go on to level 2. And I might already be at that stage in some of the openings, but I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do it, basically from scratch, as if I'm just starting chess again. So the level 2, after I've done that overview, will be to start going a little bit deeper, prioritizing the main lines first. And I want to know exactly the percentage chances of getting each opening and getting each variation of each opening. And I'm going to prioritize the main lines first, because I can never understand in books and opening books and things like that when people do the lesser openings first, this very odd line, and then there's so many of those, and then the main line comes sort of 10 variations after that. And I think start with the main line, and I want to know exactly the percentage I'm going to get that up on the board. And for that, I'm going to use the Lead Chess database. I'm going to select my levels. I'm going to find out exactly what people are playing right now. So I want to know the exact percentage I'm going to get that position on the board. And then it makes sense to prioritize that first. So once I've done that, I might consider a few, top Grandmaster games in the opening, and I will drill these positions as well. So my depth have gone a little bit further. So I'm going further into those lines, and I still know the plans and ideas, but there might be 1 or 2 exact positions where I need to know some dangerous positions, for example, and I need to know those and prioritize those. So once I've done that, level 1 and level 2, I dip into the 3rd level. Now, the 3rd level, I'm not going to drill the 3rd level because it's going to be much, much greater depth of analysis where I'm, going to consult the engine quite a lot. I'm going to consult the databases and games, and I'm going to play right through to the end games, based on those opening. And again, I'm going to place it in terms of the main lines first. I'm going to use the data to inform me of those key positions, to really analyze, maybe sit down with the board, play around with those games, right through into the end game, into the, the final stages of the end game, based on, what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to drill these positions because the further you go down the line, the wider the branches start spreading open. So what I want to do is just get familiar with, where the game could go from those sorts of positions. Okay, so let me show you exactly what that looks like just by considering why. So what I've done, I've sat down and I've looked at, as an E4 player, what I'm going to face in terms of frequency. So I brought this down into E4, E5, Roy Lopez and non-Roy Lopez lines, so Petrov and Philidor, and then I've looked at the Sicilians. Now for me, I play a system opening against the Sicilian, so I can just go Sicilians and study that. But, you might not play the crazy system that I play against the Sicilian, so you might need to look at the Dragon, the Nagyo, from different variations of the Sicilian. So the same again with the French, Scandinavian, broken down into Queen takes on Knight F6, the Caracan, the Perk of the Modern, Owens and the Alekhine. And what I've done then is put them by level 1, level 2, and level 3. So I'd mark off each of those opening variations by according to what level I'd studied them at. So I've got a massive overview of my opening and where I am with that. Let's have a look at what that means in terms of actual level 1 and level 2. What do they look like actually with the board? So I'm going to look at the Caracan Panov variation, and how I would go about looking at that in terms of breaking that down into level 1, level 2, and level 3. So here we are at level 1 with the Caracal. This is an example of what a level 1 might look like. So Caracal goes c6, and what I'm going to play is this position, going to the pan off. And I've done some videos about this, and you can learn this position in 5 minutes, and I'd recommend bishop e2, and then we get a game, we castle, and we play with the isolated queen pawn, with the idea of just bringing the rooks to the open files, trying to get an out on e5. And that's the basic overview. That's what level 1 looks like. It's a basic overview, and black might go e6, and we might castle, and we can get a game from that position, level 1. So I've done that for every single opening I'm going to face, and I've drilled those positions, so I'm very, very clear at the starting points of all the variations from both white and black. Now it's time to go to level 2 and dig a little bit deeper. So where would you start? Which opening would you look at? Well, that's gotta be based on data. It can't be, I really like this opening, I'm going to study that. Well, you could do that, I suppose, but really it should be based on data on how many losses you're facing in that particular opening. So let's say I've gone through all my opening repertoire, I've done a level 1, I've ticked that off over several weeks and months. I'm very familiar with every position at level 1. It's time to dig a little bit deeper on level 2. Say I'm struggling a little bit with the pan off the Caracal, and what I'm going to do is go further into level 2 and start studying level 2. So I'm going to look at the databases to find my openings, or I'm already studying it in an opening book or something like that. Instead of bishop e2, I'm going to study the main lines. I'm going to look at this move, queen b3, which is the best move in the position. It's main line, it's the theory, and I'm going to consult the databases and find out what black's going to play, and then I'll prioritize the lines according to need, as I said earlier. So in this position, this is the mainline position, and if we look at the database, we can see that e6, I will face that in 47% of positions, knight takes c3, 23%, knight b6, 21%, knight takes d4, 7%. So how far do I go down? Well, I think I start definitely with the first 3 lines, but maybe as a side note, the fourth, and then when we get down to 1%, 0%, that's a waste of time, waste of investment. So definitely the top line, e6, would have to be considered. So I'd look at this line, e6, and then I'd consult the database, 94%. Obviously, we're going to take the pawn. We have to really do that. And then I'll break that down into the next move, which is knight takes d4, 93%, rook c8, 3%. So obviously, the main line there is knight takes d4, and I would probably have a very small side note, but I probably wouldn't drill rook c8 if it's 3%. So I'm looking at the data, and that is informing me what I need to study. I'm not just studying something random. I'm basing it on statistics and data. So the main line of the main line will be knight takes d4, in which bishop b5, knight takes, and then the move, not taking back immediately, but queen c6, king will likely come to e7, taking with the queen, and then we've got a split between 56% queen d7 and 35% knight takes c3. So I'd need to look at those 2 lines. So the theory would branch off into 2 separate lines at this point. Queen d7, and then the best moves is taking with the queen, and going into this sort of endgame position. Right, and what I would do is put those lines at level 2, for myself into Chessable, and then I would study this position and maybe go 1 more move, and then from this position, this is the end of level 2, but it's not the end of the study in level 2, because what I need to do is, annotate those lines, and then I pick out maybe 1 or 2 games and understand this position on the board. So I'll be selecting, Grandmaster games and looking at those positions, but I wouldn't drill it any further than that. I'd stop at that point, and I'd make sure all the other lines, I'd go back to, the second choice line, back to this position, obviously, and this was the main line move e6, but then I'd start looking at the next line down, knight takes c3, which is still, 23%, so that's going to be main line number 2, and then I'm going to look at this line, I'm going to consult, what players are playing at my level. I'm also going to consult the Grandmaster database and look at positions that they play, and for example, I might be looking at lines like this, and I will probably take it to this sort of position. I was looking at this position earlier, and white gets a good game in this position down the pawn, actually. after this move and f4. And then the game goes on. And I would stop there, and that's level 2. But what I would do then, obviously, in this position, the same as the mainline one, I would choose a Grandmaster game. I'd look over this position a little bit, but I'd stop at that point. And that's level 2 done for this variation. There's a few more to go for this Panoff variation at level 2. I put all those in, learn them, and then move on to something else. What I'd do, I'd record that. It could be just something as simple as this, as a dot of colour on a PowerPoint screen or an Excel spreadsheet. It's probably more professional, but it doesn't matter. And what you can see, this is an example. I've not done this yet, but I might have gone through all my whites and all my blacks, and I've gone on to level 1 on every one, tick those green. Yeah, I'm fine with those positions. And then level 2, I've started to do, for example, some on level 2. I've not, if you'll notice, done the Philodor, and I've not done the Nimzo. I've not done the Scandinavian 2 knight f6. There might be a particular reason for that. It might be like, I don't really need to know, the Philodor at a greater level of depth because it's not coming up. It's not that dangerous. I know what I'm playing absolutely fine at level 1. I can move up to level 2 and level 3 on other areas and ignore that and just keep that at level 1. That's absolutely fine. Same with the Nimzo. Maybe I'm not studying that in greater depth because, it's like it comes up in like 1% of games or something. So can sort of push other levels first and prioritize those. And I might mark on a red with ones that I'm struggling with. So I might, if I'm struggling with the French, for example, I might mark that as a red. And I might mark in orange, if I just move myself out of the way, the areas I'm going to study next. So orange could be, this is what I'm studying at the moment. This is where I'm currently working. The green areas are absolutely fine. I've done these. I know what I'm doing. And the red areas are those areas I'm struggling with. Though the reality is, if I was doing this for real, there would be a lot more red areas. But anyway, so let's look at what level 3 looks like. Well, level 3 doesn't consist of, importing anything, but it consists of really analysing the positions, playing around with it, maybe get another board out, set them up to a real board, consult the engine, and play around the position quite a lot. But this is definitely not to be import because the branches are going to be too, vast in the area. So looking at this position, this is the start of level 3, for example, from the, the Panoff Caracan. And I'm looking at the engine and I'm playing around, and this is an example of the sort of thing I'd do. So like the engine likes bishop d2, makes sense, put the bishop on g2 as well. And then I'm thinking, what would black play in this position as a human? And looking at the databases are probably getting less and less. So maybe on this idea, maybe somebody would play this to develop the bishop along this diagonal, in which case the engine likes d6, plus 3.5% for white here, pretty good. And if takes, we've got takes. And then what does that look like? We've got things like this. And then we can actually come in with a rook. Okay, let's look at that. I'll play around with that a little bit. Let's go back. Let's say instead of g6, we are threatening this pawn after all. Let's say black plays a6, makes sense. And then the computer likes pushing these pawns to create an advanced pass pawn. Let's say we do try that idea again. Just pushing the pawns. Bishop g7, hitting the rook. Bring the rook to here, bishop, something like that. Play around with the position. I'm doing basic analysis and getting a feel for the overall position. So we bring the rook to c8. What would the computer like to do? What would other players do? What's Grandmaster's done? Pushing c6, b takes, b takes. And white's taking advantage of these two bishops while pushing these pawns and also bringing the rook to the open files. This just makes logical sense as well. So I play around with these positions quite a lot. And I really try to get to understand, the position and what's working in the position. And that's level 3. I mean, in terms of plans and ideas at level 2, you want to be doing a little bit of that, obviously, because you want to know how the game goes, or you'll be looking at that with the Grandmaster games as well. But at level 3, you're really sitting down, and you should already be very familiar with these positions now, because if you've gone through the process of level 1, level 2, you'll be able to just go, let's put a position up at level 3 at the end of a level 2 line, and I can set that up already. I don't even need to consult my database. This is the ideal anyway, because I already know those positions really well, and I'm going to explore them really further into that sort of system. So that is my overall, idea about looking at openings by a level. It's just an idea at this stage. I've not done it yet, but I think I might do and see how I get on. So let me know if you've got any feedback, any other ideas that might go into this. Thank you. Take care.